Hey guys, welcome back. There's probably going to be some wind noise in this video. We're still getting a little bit of weather, from the end of the hurricane up here. But I just wanted to show you, I went and bought a tractor yesterday, and some of the stuff that I kind of take for granted or think is mundane, some people really like to see. So we'll take a look at it and go over a few things that I noticed just in the short time looking at it, picking it up. I got it bought right. There's literally no way I can lose on it. So what would be ideal is if I could get it running and put a set of forks on it. We've got a little Kubota here, a B7510, but there's always something you can't lift. It's always not quite big enough. So it would really be nice if I could put a set of forks on this tractor and put the bucket back on the Kubota and just leave it. And of course it's got the mid-mount mower on it too. So that way, it's got a little vinyl cab too. So if I had the bucket on it, I could push snow in the wintertime, not have to switch back and forth. But we'll see. Usually when I buy old tractors like this, if they can be revived, I'd rather do that, whether we sell them or whatever. I always try to get them going first. If there's something that is terribly wrong with them, or it just doesn't make any sense money-wise to fix it, after that I'll part them out. That way at least some of the parts can be reused with somebody else that's working on their tractor. A lot of the stuff they don't make anymore, so and that way it's not completely going to waste. It drives me nuts when people take in complete tractors to the scrapyard and just drop it off. So anyway, enough yakking. Let's take a look at this thing. It's a Farmall 300 utility. It's got a Freeman loader on it. The guy said that the lift cylinders leaked really bad on it, so he just unhooked them. He added some chains up front, and I'll show you here in a minute, that are past sketchy. But it's got three really nice tires. The rims are nice. They're not all rotted out around the valve stem. The sheet metal's not terrible. Somebody's taken all the badges off of it. It drives me nuts when they do that. The grill's got a pretty good dent in it, but that's all fixable. This bucket, these were a manure bucket that somebody added. It wouldn't have had these sides on it. This is the original bucket here, and then these spikes, and they probably work great for manure, if you're cleaning out a barn or a feedlot or something, but past that they're not very handy. So that's probably gonna go to the wayside if everything else works out okay. It was trip bucket, set up for a trip bucket originally, but somebody has added these tilt cylinders. They are double acting. The lift cylinders are not. They're only one way. So we won't have any down pressure with this. It's been pretty heavily farmerized. And I'll show you a couple examples here. One thing that's really stands out is somebody has added angle iron to these steering links on both sides. I also noticed that these arms are loose on the top of the spindle. Hopefully the splines aren't trash in there. most of the time all it would take is somebody to tighten up that nut, you know, when they first notice it, but go ahead and use it for years that way, and then, you know, the splines just they disappear. It does have a new starter on it, or newer. He switched it over to 12 volt. He put an alternator on it, and he said the alternator never worked. So he actually made another rack back here, and he kept an extra battery. When this one ran down, he would just switch them out. It's got some Summit gauges in it, and at one point somebody had done some wiring, you know, they put it in loom. That part of it doesn't look terrible. Somebody put a lawnmower seat on it. I do have the foam for it. One thing I noticed right off the bat is, besides this gaping hole that they cut in the hood here, that's another pet peeve of mine. You know, normally this hole would just be big enough for the pipe to come through. Well, nobody wanted to take the muffler off to take the hood off, so they get out their whiz wheel or even torch, and they cut the hole in the hood big enough that you can take it off without pulling the muffler off. So that's bad enough. This is actually one of the cleaner cuts here, but the one thing that I noticed is it's loose. Well, if we pull that out of there, the pipe is still on the end of the muffler. So that tells me that the threads down in the manifold are probably shot. Not the end of the world, but not very handy. Again, all the emblems have been taken off. The gas tank does not look great. Pretty rusty. There's ways of dealing with that. It's not the end of the world. It's just not very handy. There's a lot of work that goes into that, especially something that has a loader on it. It's not very handy to get in and work on some of this stuff. And sometimes, depending on how much work you have to do, it's actually easier to take the loader clear off, go ahead and get the tractor in decent shape, and then put it back on. Oh, it's had, both of these steering arms have been welded. The torque feels okay. We'll see how it works when it's running. It has tons of slop in the clutch pedal, and the clutch is clear down here. So if you look, that pin, it's not terrible. There's some slack there. We have a bolt in the torque linkage here, and if you look in the back where this pivot is, and it's in this is the back of the pedal, there's all kinds of slop right there because somebody used a bolt instead of a pin. So we'll have to address that. He said the brakes were terrible. I pushed on the pedals a little bit, and yeah, they at the very least need to be adjusted. These fenders are pretty decent. They look a lot like what was on an H or an M, and I think they mount the same. It does have the fast hitch on it, and he said he did use the fast hitch, and it's got this adapter to go to a regular 3-point. So hopefully everything is decent in that department. Yeah, it's got pretty decent tires. The other side isn't bad. It's just older, you know, kind of dry. It has plenty of tread in it. All the tires were up, so. Another thing I noticed, these are the valves for the loader. The end of this one must be stripped out because it just That one seems to be, I mean, it's loose, but it's not broken. That one just hangs out. But yeah, the brakes, I mean, they go all way down there. Chances are the seal is probably out of the inside and it's letting rear end grease into the brake discs in there. But yeah, this is it. I turned the sediment bowl. I turned it off earlier because it was on, and when you turn it off, it drips. Well, I noticed that what was dripping is not gasoline, it's water. So that doesn't help any. We also, for some reason, have two coils here. This is the factory, the original international coil. And I don't know if it went bad or if they were chasing problems or something, but we've added, this is actually a Ford coil, because it has the post or the knob style terminals on it, and they just slid a spade connector on it sideways, which will work. I mean, it looks terrible, but whatever. Same deal here. We've added angle iron to the steering link, and yeah, this arm is loose on the spindle too. And somehow somebody has broken all this. This would have all been smooth across there. They broke the end out of this casting. There would have been 4 bolt holes here in the front, so I don't know if they had something mounted to it, if they hooked a chain underneath it and were pulling on it, but yeah, it's gone. Looking at the radiator, it's kind of plugged up. If everything seems decent on this, I'll go ahead and power wash it. That's a good way to find where your leaks are, because everything here is just caked. You know, you can't really tell anything because everything's oily. So give it a good wash, then you can see, you know, your leaks are still going to come back. So watch for the wet spots, and that'll tell you what you need to work on. Speaking of wet spots, I see we've got one on the trailer floor here. Looks like it's dripping off of that bolt right there. I'm not sure what that's about. And down here where we can see it now, I'd say that's definitely the problem with the brakes. There's a seal in this housing that seals the shaft. A lot of times that seal gets old and it will let rear end oil into the brakes, and judging by how wet it is right there, I would say that's exactly what's wrong with the brakes. Other than that, it doesn't look too terrible down here. Kind of a dent in the oil pan, but that's not out of the ordinary. A lot of people think you can, and you can, I guess, you can jack on that, wheel your floor jack in here, and it works. I mean, it just dents the bottom of the oil pan. You kind of see the alternator up there. It's a Delco. They're pretty simple. I'm not sure why it wouldn't work, but he said it never charged, so looks like we need to do something here too. The tire's rubbing right on that tube. Sorry guys, I gotta keep reminding myself to slow down and record some of this stuff as I go. I'm not used to the whole recording thing yet, so and some of these things I kind of, I don't know, I think they're boring. So, you know, comment below. Do you want to see that kind of stuff? Is that something you'd rather just skip over. Anyway, here's what I'm doing. So I got both sides of the hood off, and we know there's water in the gas tank. I could tell from the way the sediment bowl leaks. It was really clear. It didn't smell like gas, so it has to be water. Where it got in, I'm not sure. Well, yeah, I know exactly where it got in. The vent holes in the top of that. Which, now that I'm looking at the cap, I think somebody added and they didn't need it. A lot of these caps are vented down here. You know, that way water doesn't get in, and people think they're not, so they go ahead and poke holes in the top of it, and voila, you have a water leak. Anyway, I wanted to go ahead and pull this hose off. Sometimes when the float sticks in a carburetor, it can actually fill this up with gas, and you don't want to try to start it that way, because you know you could hydrolock the engine. So I always just kind of make it a habit. I'll pull this off, that way you can tell what's going on, you know. Well, when we did, if I can get you in there, let's see. When I did, there was a bunch of water that ran out, and since the sediment bowl was left on, I would assume that some of that came from bouncing around on the trailer on the way home. But we need to get that out of there. So on these Farmalls, and well, really just about any carburetor, the older ones anyway, there's a drain in this bowl. Well, that's what this little plug is right here. So I got my bucket to catch all this so don't make a big mess on the trailer floor. But we'll pull this plug out, and I'm hoping that it will go ahead and drain all the water out of the tank, out of the carburetor. You know, and once we start getting gas that might actually burn, we'll go ahead and put this plug back in, and we'll move on to the ignition. I can tell the butterfly in the carburetor is free. I can hear it when you pull the throttle open. You can hear it click in there. So that's something you want to check. You don't want to fire it up and this thing be stuck wide open. That's not ideal. The choke is free too. The cable's, I don't know, kind of rigged up there in the dash. It's really floppy, but it did open and close, so that's free. So that's a good sign. Chances are that, well, I'm positive, we'd still have to take this carburetor off and clean it, because I'm sure there's rust in this bowl. But that's a good policy with any tractor you don't know anything about. Unless it runs great right off the bat, just figure on pulling the carburetor off and having it rebuilt if you don't have the stuff to do it yourself. I do, so it's not a big deal for me. I actually kind of enjoy it. So that's, but yeah, this is the kind of stuff I was talking about. If you want to see, you know, the stuff that I think is kind of boring, you know, draining the water out, if you want to see that, put it in the comments. Let me know. And if you don't want to see that, I'll start skipping over that kind of stuff. So yeah, let's see if I can get you guys set up and make a big mess here. That's going to spray right out on that arm. Ew. Gross. Yeah, really rusty, really gross. Yeah, we might have to rebuild that carburetor before we can even really get it to run. But yeah, maintenance is important. You know, if you leave your tractor outside and year round, you know, you're gonna battle with stuff like this, whether it's in the gas tank. I see a lot of times you go to buy a tractor that hasn't been run in a while, where the dipstick goes into the block, it's really oily right there, but the tractor hasn't been run. Well, what that tells me, if you pull the dipstick out and look at it, almost every time it's way over full. Well, that's because there's water in there, and of course oil floats on top of water, so it looks like the oil level is way high. If you pull the plug out of it, there'll be water in the bottom. And same with rear ends, transmissions, rear ends. If you have a tractor if you're looking at a tractor that's been sitting a long time, and the axle seals are leaking all over the place, and the PTO seal, a lot of times if you pull that drain plug, there'll be a whole bunch of water in there. You know, the seals probably weren't great to start with, but never really gave too much trouble because the oil never was up there, or not in enough quantities to, you know, make a big deal. But once the water gets there and it floats the oil up, then it can just run out, and that's exactly what it does. So yeah, now we're into the really clear. So yeah, that's all water. It doesn't even smell like gas. And the inside of the gas tank is nasty. There's lots of real flaky, you know, almost like surface rust. If you brush it, it's like powdery, but that can cause a huge headache because with vibration, you know, and gas slopping around in there, it'll end up down in the bottom. And a lot of times it'll plug up a screen either in your sediment bowl, if it still has one. A lot of people throw them away. I did see this has an inline right here. This is a great idea, especially if you have a gas tank you know has a little bit of rust in it. And there's even sometimes I'll take the sediment bowl out of the system. There's so much junk in there that you'll be fighting that all the time. So I'll rig up temporarily just a ball valve to go ahead and let all that crap come right on through, and it will end up in here, which is where you want it. You want to catch it. So when this gets plugged up, starts giving trouble, you just take these off, pitch it, put a new one in, and go on. And we're still getting water. I'll bet there's probably 2 gallons of water in there. It's gonna take a while. It looks like the flow, as far as volume, you know, it looks pretty good. The tractor would definitely run off of that. But yeah, and it won't run off water. While that's draining, I was gonna show you. The owner said that these lift cylinders leaked really bad on the loader, so he just unhooked them. And he rigged up some chains in the front here to hold it up. Well, I noticed when we were loading it that they looked really sketchy. And the bucket actually hangs off the back of the trailer just a little bit. And I didn't want to move it forward because we're already a little heavy on the truck. It made it drive funny. But where this was parked, there was not a good way to get a trailer around to the front of the tractor, and not really a good way to hook onto it and pull it, is it was in town. So we just pulled up to the back of it, winched it on, and tied it down and went on. But yeah, I get to looking at these chains that this guy put on, and this is exactly why I don't trust a lot of people's welding, because that is not cool. I mean, the geometry is terrible here anyway, because you're actually multiplying the weight of the loader by being, the flatter it gets, the more pressure is going to be on here. And the front is just as ugly. And really that's yeah, the geometry here is not great either. This hook should have been on the bottom. Anyway, I absolutely did not want to trust that and have the loader fall down on the trailer. So I went ahead and wrapped a regular, you know, a nice heavy lug chain on there. That way if these did fail, you know, it couldn't fall completely down. And I'm glad I did, because that one so far is still holding, but you know, why chance it? I see a lot of sketchy stuff going up and down the road, and it's not cool. You know, people get hurt with stupid stuff. So did a few things off camera. We ended up getting about 2 gallons of water out of the fuel tank, and even then we weren't getting any fuel through the carburetor. I mean, you could take the main needle out of it and gas would just pour out, but it wouldn't draw any up into the engine. So I pulled the carburetor apart, and it wasn't horrible, but it did have some junk in the main jet and the emulsion tubes. So we cleaned that out and put that all back together, and we worked on the ignition. Nothing huge there. Pulled the cap off of it, and it had a little bit of corrosion on the underside of the cap where it had some moisture in there, but the points didn't even need to be cleaned. It already had fire. So it has a key switch up there. The guy lost the key, so I just made a jumper go from the hot side of the coil to the battery. And yeah, there's that Ford coil there that just has posts there. They're not even threaded, but it works.